Is Russia digging in even as Ukraine advances in an unexpected direction? I'm Paul, U.S. Army combat veteran. It's August 7th, 2023. This is your daily Ukraine update. Let's get into it. Okay, first, let's take a look at the control map. The biggest change in the last 24 hours actually coming to us from an unexpected direction. It's actually going to be here in the north, just a little bit south of Svatove. And as you can see, Ukrainian forces advancing probably, actually, this looks like a little over a kilometer into Russian-controlled territory. Let's actually get the measurement here. So it looks like they started from this point here and have advanced to this point. So almost 2 kilometers of advance into Russian territory. And this is significant, I think, because again, a 2-kilometer advance in the south is considered a major breakthrough. And I do want to point out that up north like this, right, this still hasn't necessarily moved the Russian lines back to where they started. You can see Russian forces launching their own offensive effort here, starting at the Korolivka and Karmazynivka. You could see they staged a small and then a considerable breakthrough, right? Ukrainian forces counterattacking, patching the breakthrough, and now pushing them back almost to the starting line, so to speak, at least here near Karmazynivka. So again, labeling this territory as liberated, I think, is being generous. I think this is more about a attack and counterattack happening in pretty quick succession over the course of a month. But I think this is emblematic of where I think Ukrainian strategy is falling short. As you guys can see here from the combat map, right, there's Russian counterattacks happening outside of Robotyne, outside of Donetsk, outside of Bakhmut, and in a very limited basis north of Satove. And when we look at actually a really great map, it's coming to us from Brady Afric on Twitter, but he's compiled an open source map of known Russian fortifications, and this is the updated fortification map. And I want you guys to point out, you could see some of these we've known for a long time. Russia's been working to build these, but you could see how many new fortifications are out there. Look at the extensive fortification system added outside of Robotyne. You could see to the south, there's almost 3 major defensive lines along this effort here. Actually, 4. 1, 2, 3, and 4. And you can see these are now interconnected, right? You could see the dual line system here. You can see, let's see if we can find Staromayorsk, which should be around here. But you can see there's an unbroken now continuation of Russian lines stretching all the way to Donetsk Oblast, right? We can see the front line clearly because, and this is emblematic of one of the things that we've talked about on this channel for some time, which is when the offense and defense both get a day, a week, an hour, it favors the defense, right? The offense needs to refit and then move out to a new location. The defense isn't constrained by that. The defense, wherever they are, is usually in the aggregate a good enough spot to dig in. So that hour is spent digging in instead of transiting. And you can see how tight Russia has gotten, right? Other than urban areas, which as we've seen in the Battle of Bakhmut, you don't need to dig trenches when you have buildings. Other than those urban areas, Russia has a very tight defensive line, right? Behind Bakhmut, you have the Wagner line here. But it's also important to note that the most extensive fortifications, by far, by an order of magnitude, is in the south, is in Zaporizhzhia, right? When we look to the north, you can see Lysychansk, you're looking at some fairly thin defensive lines. Kreminna, again, now this is some rough terrain, but look to the north. Look at how much thinner and smaller Russian defensive efforts are outside of Satove. And this isn't an accident. This is because Russia has been on the offensive in this region. So instead of focusing their troops' time and effort on digging in, they're focusing it on conducting offensive operations. And this has been one of the points that I've beaten to death on this channel, but I feel like I get proven correct again and again that where the enemy is conducting offensive action is the place to launch your own offensive action, right? It's like a counterpuncher. Which boxer are you going to fight? Are you going to fight a boxer whose hands are up, protecting their face, where their chin is tucked? It's going to be really hard to hit this boxer, but you're much more likely to be able to counterpunch a boxer who's stretched out, throwing their fist, right? Some even bad boxers have their chin kind of out and turned for you. It's a no-brainer. You want to counterpunch wherever possible. And it seems like fixating on Zaporizhzhia is kind of a waste of men and material. I mean, again, you can see that north of Satove, the Russian defensive lines seem much thinner, much more favorable. And this is terrain where we've seen Ukraine conduct an offensive before. This was where the Kharkiv offensive liberated large swaths of territory. So I point this out just to recognize that when we see things like, again, 2 kilometers of flipped Russian territory in a day, that would be almost a breakthrough in Zaporizhzhia. But here, again, we're just contextualizing it as a counterattack. When we go over to the news, right, it seems interesting. Again, Ukraine says the Saudi Arabian talks are productive, but Russia calls them doomed. And this is one of the things you have to understand. Peace negotiations are more or less a bellwether of what each side thinks, how each side thinks the war is going for them. So when Russia says we'll never sit down and conduct peace talks, it says that Russia thinks the war is skewing in their favor. When Ukraine talks about productive peace talks, it means they think that generally the war is going against them, right? At some point, both sides are going to have to come to the realization that continued fighting is less productive than a realistic and achievable peace deal. And for both sides, at this point, they both feel that continued military action will put them in a more favorable negotiating position in the future. And when you have that, you are unlikely to get productive peace talks. However, it's worth noting that 40 countries participated in these Saudi talks, which again are the meeting before the meeting, right? So Russia was not invited. This isn't a peace summit. This is a discussion of what would a peace summit look like? What is on the table? Who is willing to contribute and broker? You can see it includes big players, China, India, and the United States. The only person, again, Russia no showing, but that's because it's a meeting about how to talk to Russia. So we shouldn't find that particularly alarming. But nonetheless, when Russia unprompted calls these talks doomed, it's not a great start. The other thing that I thought was interesting is, again, that Kiev seems to continue its total fixation on Zaporizhzhia. All sides confirming that Kiev has hit the Chonar Bridge leading to Crimea. And the Chonar, we've heard, has been a target for some time. It's a key bridge linking surface traffic, namely trucks, from Crimea to Melitopol, right? Key for resupplying forces, again, in the along the Zaporizhzhia front. You can see this front here, resupplied through Melitopol, which in turn, right, is fed through this Chonar Bridge right here. So disrupting this fight, this flow of supplies from Crimea is likely to cause considerable issues for Russian logistics. But again, as you can see, it's not quite the same as Kherson, where a large body of water cut off troops. Instead, Russia continues to have at least some level of potential access via land connections. Again, a long drive behind Russian lines. But to me, it's a symbol that Kiev is not interested in changing its strategy. They are not interested in looking at new alternatives. And again, like just to recognize, they're literally looking at this spot and saying, yes, our combat power is best deployed into this 4-layer thick formation of mines and trenches. So again, the less progress we see from this multi-$100 billion army from Kiev, the more Soviet I see them fight, the more dissatisfied I am, the more I think the high-level leadership is letting down the individual fighting soldiers of Ukraine, who are doing, by all accounts, an incredibly excellent job. So anyway, guys, if you're interested in getting the latest national security news right to your inbox, you want to check out the Strategic Sitrep. This is our newsletter that I launched. It is meant to be the non-clickbait national security news. It only comes out once a week, and it looks at the 3 biggest stories in the national security space of the week, and it gives you a no nonsense, no hype headline, description of not just what has happened, but what does it mean? Why is this significant, right? And this context is something I think a lot of news stories leave out. But if you're interested, you can go to the strategicsitrep.com/subscribe or strategicsitrep.com and sign up. Anyway, guys, that's all I had for you. Thank you, as always, to our Colonel tier members of combatvetnews.com. I couldn't do this without you guys. I appreciate you so much. Thanks to all our Lieutenant tier members, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Cheers.